Hi, everyone. This is Caroline Griffin. I am the Event and Operations Manager for Riot. Thank you for joining us today for Riot's Virtual Lunch and Learn series. I'm super excited today to have Christina and Augustin from Ubidots with us. Ubidots has been partners of Riot for just over a year now. They're entering their second year of partnership with Riot, and they've been great partners so far. So I'm very excited to have them with us today. But just a couple quick housekeeping items before we get started. The attendee list is hidden for participant privacy. And if you do have any questions, please do put those in the Q&A and or chat box, and we will make sure all of your questions get answered at the end of the presentation. And lastly, this presentation will be recorded and posted on Riot's YouTube channel and shared on the Meetup page. So if you need to leave early, no worries, you will find it there. But without further ado, I know you guys are all here for Ubidots, so I will hand it over to them.
Nice. Okay, so thank you, Carolyn, and thanks, Riot, for setting this up. And of course, thanks to everybody who's with us in the audience. We are thrilled to be here to share ideas. I promise we're going to keep it super fun and practical. And we want this to be about you. So I encourage whoever feels comfortable to share in the chat what you're working on, and just what's your background. And also at the end, we're gonna share a link because we're giving out some office hours for us to get to know you better. So I'll start by introducing myself. I'm Christina. I'm based in Colombia, and I work for Ubidots as the head of business development. So in case you're wondering what we do, we are a low-code IoT application enablement platform for system integrators, OEMs, and IoT entrepreneurs without the time or energy to build entire production-ready IoT applications. So from device-friendly APIs to clean UI for end users, we offer a whole toolkit for having IoT solutions up and running without the need to hire a software development team or spending thousands of dollars. So I'm here with Augustine. He is our CEO, and he has more than 10 years of hands-on experience in IoT. And I mean, of course, as the leader of Ubidots, building a global IoT startup. So with no further ado, we'll be here to answer questions, and let's have fun.
Awesome. Well, Christy, thank you very much. And thank you all for being here, and Caroline for setting this up. So as Christy said, one of the most exciting part of our jobs is to learn what our users are building with Ubidots. A lot of them happen to be IoT entrepreneurs, so self-made entrepreneurs who turn the passion into a business, and that's what this is about today. So this being a North Carolina event, I thought we'll bring a real story from an IoT entrepreneur who is based in the Raleigh area. So the reason I wanted to bring up Charles Magellan is his name, we call him Chip, is because he's based in North Carolina, and B, he is the perfect example of someone who turned a couple of hobbies into a successful business. So hobby number one, Chip is a loyal long-term user of the Raleigh area parks. So he loves spending time outdoors with either by himself or with his family. And hobby number two, he's been a maker at heart, the type of person who has a room full of electronic products and PCBs and soldering stations, etc. The type of person who loves to learn, who loves to discover new technologies and put them to good use. And probably the reason, or one of the reasons we're all here today is because we can relate to that type of archetype, if you will. So when I began researching to do this presentation, I looked up Chip's projects on Hackster.io, and I was surprised to find out that his projects have an aggregate of almost 100,000 views. So way to go, Chip. That's a great way to give back to the community. And also, as far as I can tell, it was a great way to share this passion about electronics and IoT in general and turn it, as I said, into a business. So I remember back in 2015, one of Chip's projects that he shared on Hackster was this GPS device that it was actually only over Wi-Fi, not even cellular. He was using particle back in the days, and he would take you around either the park or the house and just plot the coordinates. And this became very popular, and he even got, I think, some contracts from it because people were asking him, "Hey, can you do something similar for me," etc. And this is the moment around which this idea came to mind. What if he could use IoT not only to trace his own logs or to measure certain variables around the outdoors in the parks? What if he could help the park authorities or the park users use this data to make better decisions? And that's exactly how Sea Insights was born. So in 2016, Chip co-founded this company to help local parks count and report bikes, joggers, hikers that are using their facilities every day. So a very cool story. I'm sure you're familiar with these parks. I had a couple of emails with Chip before this talk, and he shared with me that he's already covering all of the Wake County parks in North Carolina, and his business continues to thrive. So like Chip, there's millions of independent workers in the US, or better said, professionals who chose a career of independence. This is so big that reports are talking about $1 trillion economy. So this is almost like an entire country. To put it in perspective, if the independent workers in the US were a country on their own, their GDP would be around the size of Spain, and not so far from the size of a country like Australia. So that's one of the reasons why this demographic group has begun to receive more and more attention. And today we took on the challenge to kind of understand it a bit better. One of the cool things I found out is that more than 80% of these independents are reporting being happier working on their own than they were while working for a traditional full-time job. So it's great to hear that not only Chip is not alone, and you're not alone if you're pursuing an IoT entrepreneurial endeavor. Chances are you're also going to be happier at realizing this dream while working on your own. Let's zoom in a little bit about this group. We found that about a third of them are actually using technology. Independence, they gather all types of economic activities. So let's break that down into what I would call what was the most common trait, or historically, one of the first ways of becoming independent using tech was e-commerce. In fact, very related to today, I was reading how the 2009 crisis where actually companies like Shopify, which happens to be one of, I think it's Canada's largest tech company. It's a public company. It's huge. In case you don't know about it, it's because they power hundreds of thousands of e-commerce stores through a white label mechanism. So as I read about them, I saw that the spike that they had in terms of people setting up their own business was actually during the crisis. Of course, a lot of professionals being laid off their jobs, a lot of college graduates who couldn't get a job right after school, they were turning to internet and these tools, digital tools, to create businesses on their own. So not so far from what might be happening today, and definitely an opportunity to begin exploring how these technologies 10 years later are enabling new types of businesses. The other part of digital enablers are, of course, the sharing economy, Uber drivers, Airbnb hosts. This is where most of them would fit. Of course, also independent workers. Freelancing platforms, I think now more than ever, with this remote work, it becomes less important where talent is based. And this is opening up, of course, even more opportunities for independent workers who choose to work from home and do their own freelancing gigs. And then the part that we'll zoom in a bit more is the application enablement tools. Today, it's very easy to create a lot of things that maybe 10 years ago would have taken engineers, like a lot of developers to have ready. Christy, I think you've even worked with Google Sheets and Google Forms, and you've created like very elaborate stuff to manage your own leads and everything that we do internally using no-code tools. So this type of application enablement tools is what's allowing people like Chip to create entire businesses on their own using tools like Ubidots, Particle, and a lot of the players that we see in the IoT ecosystem. So this is where Chip would be with his business. So with that intro, let's start looking into what those IoT businesses have in common. What have we observed within our own user base, within our own experience as IoT entrepreneurs? So we're extracting mainly 4 today. First is a problem worth solving. Second is a strong value proposition, a large enough market, and a subscription business model. Let's look at each one of them. So the first thing I usually encounter when talking to other entrepreneurs is the love for tech. Of course, we're engineers, we love tech. But this also means that sometimes we are tempted to sell something just because it's cool. I'm sure we've all seen the headlines like AI, crypto powered, machine learning, blah, blah, blah. But it's not about selling tech, it's about selling a problem. Technology, selling a solution to a problem. So technology has always been about solving problems, no matter what type of tools you use, AI, IoT, ML, whatever you name it. Try to center around the problem. And that problem sometimes is not a headache. Sometimes it's just a nice to have. So the first check you want to do, and if you have an idea in mind, I encourage you to do this, is are you selling a painkiller or a vitamin? Are you really solving a problem where there are real measurable consequences to inaction? I brought a great example from a cold chain monitoring entrepreneur down in Mendoza, Argentina. Pablo designed this device that you see in the upper right to just put a temperature probe in the refrigerators, read the temperature, and then report it to Ubidots or his white label application in Ubidots. And with this, he's been able to create a thriving business in over a big enough or enough portion of a local market in Mendoza, Argentina, that is enough for him and his family to have a recurring revenue income and a successful business. The second question I like to ask, is the problem unavoidable? So sometimes there are regulations or just natural steps in technology that cause a specific industry to stop doing things the way they were doing it and start doing it in a different way. The PLC, the programmable logical computer, is a great example. Back in the 60s, factories, they already had some logic incorporated, but it was like through electrical wires. It was very hard to make changes to the production process. And when the PLC came out, just everybody had to have a PLC. There was no way you could run a manufacturing business and be profitable at the same time due to market pressures, etc., without having a PLC. So this natural change in technology sometimes opens up a lot of possibilities. Valentin, he has a company called Silverlight, and I didn't know this, but in Switzerland, there's, as you can imagine, it's a small country, there's not a lot of land, so they are really serious about protecting their lands and making sure that they can be used later on for agricultural purposes. So whenever there's a construction, imagine somebody wants to build a house, they bring all these machines and trucks, and sometimes they damage the soil. So the regulators, they needed a way to see if a particular construction site was damaging the floor. And Valentin designed this very specialized sensor to measure the soil and humidity and other variables to know whether they can work or not. Another question is the problem underserved? So sometimes as I said, there are ways of doing things, and the technology enables a new way of doing it, so that nobody else was doing it before. So there's an entire market. That's what they call it, the blue ocean market. So to give you an example, environmental research has always been about going to a particular site and taking some measurements, be it in the water, in the jungle, in the forest. Particularly, there's a company called Limnotech that is kind of enabling a new way of environmental research by designing these smart buoys, as they call it. They embed a lot of different sensors in it that maybe 5 or 10 years back would have costed a lot of money, and maybe they wouldn't have had cell coverage or IoT, LP1 coverage, etc. And now they are installing these along the Great Lakes, helping the research groups take more measurements and fine-tune their models. And then, last but not least, is the problem yours? So this is perhaps the most important question, because history tells that entrepreneurs who have begun their businesses by solving something that they experienced before, what you call scratch your own itch, sort of have better chances to understand what those underlying problems are and design a product that solves those problems. So Chip is a good example. He's as I said, he was an outdoors guy, and he said, well, what if I could use this that I'm already using for myself and put it to better use through the park authorities and help them manage the parks better. So second, let's talk about the value proposition. Now, I know in the internet, there's tons of resources about creating a winning value proposition, a lot of literature around that. So I'm not gonna dive into the things that I know you can find through Google very easily. And instead, we thought about bringing something that we've extracted, again, by talking to a lot of entrepreneurs. And it's a way for you to be able to sell IoT projects faster and with a lot of arguments that would help your customer sell or justify an IoT investment easier. So we call it the IoT Value Function. Basically, it's made up of 3 components. At the end, what you want to do as an entrepreneur is you want to create enough value so that you can capture some of that value through your pricing, and then the remaining value for your customer to save a lot of money, depending on the size of his business, or improve a process. So one of the things we discovered is that this value function historically has been a lot about the asset protection. If you go back to the roots of IoT, back in the days where it used to be called M2M, you got this, I remember the low jack GPS tracker. It was around protecting an asset that was tens of thousands of dollars worth. So it made sense to put a $100 device in each one of these assets. So the value function was a no-brainer, because you're spending $100, but you're protecting something worth way more. The problem with that is that as IoT began to sort of get into other fields, as the cost per device lowered, more connectivity, more enablement tools, then the value was more hidden. So you had to come up with more creative ways to show that an IoT solution was going to drive value for our organization. So to exemplify this first part of the equation, let's see those examples we just talked about. In the case of Pablo in Argentina, would be you're installing a device because the content of that refrigerators are vaccines worth $100,000, for example. Or Valentin in Switzerland, he tells he's protecting the constructors from getting a fine from the regulators, for example. And in the case of Limnotech, they're protecting the Great Lakes. No more explanations required. So the second and the third forms parts of the function are more like operational. So if in cases where you see that, well, maybe the value is not enough, a very typical one, we've seen a lot of attempts to do IoT for agriculture. Some of them have been successful, some of them not. In the cattle monitoring, for example, it's very common. In some countries, it's very common that the cows get stolen, right? So if you go to a farmer and tell them, okay, I'm going to offer you a GPS tracking solutions for your cows so that they don't get stolen, and it's going to be $100 per device, $10 per device per month, monthly fee. So they're going to go like, okay, I have 1,000 cows. I only lose 5 every year. Of course, I wish that didn't happen, but if I had to install a $100 sensor times 1,000 cows, it's going to be a $100,000 project to protect 5 cows that are being stolen every year. That's probably just 5K worth of value. So in that case, it's either a no-go, so either the project is not done, or you start seeing for these other hidden value functions. So for example, in that case would be, well, you know, if you have a device in each cow, you might we might put an accelerometer, and based on the movement, we could tell if the cow is pregnant or not, or based on a temperature sensor, we could tell if the cow is sick or not. Then that's gonna drive, that's gonna improve your process by allowing you to detect a disease earlier on, treat it earlier on, and then the cow is going to grow bigger and they're going to weigh more, and then you're going to sell them for more money times 1,000. That's going to be this much. So that's the type of reasonings that you have to sort of help your clients do for them to discover this hidden value. In the case of Pablo, would be, well, there's a lot of medical staff that are using time to take manual measurements every day in each refrigerator to know the temperature. It might not be a lot, it might be 30 seconds, but if you multiply by hundreds of nurses across many hospitals, maybe, you know, there's a couple of bucks of value every day or every month that are worth, you know, saving. The second case would be, well, maybe for the case of the transport of the soil monitoring at construction sites, if they can alert early on that you cannot work on a particular day, maybe these constructors don't have to transport all the machinery and the staff to work that day because they cannot work anyway. And then for the smart lakes, well, a lot of these measurements were taken, they had to go on a boat a particular day, they had to go and take samples, come back to the lab, analyze them, and that could only be done, you know, X amount of times per week or per month. Now they can do it every 5 minutes because they have temperature or sorry, a device, an IoT device in place. And then the last one, which is usually the most exciting ones, is this is where disruption happens. This is where you start seeing things like a bike manufacturing saying, where a bike manufacturer saying, well, I have these traditional assets that I've been selling my entire life. I'm going to put a sensor in this bike, and then I'm going to sell it at a premium. So the moment that your product or that your customer's product increases value because it's a connected product, then there's a lot of things you can do, a lot of network effects. But when a lot of people buy this product, it becomes very, very exciting. So in the case of the cold chain, could be, well, maybe a buyer could prefer, I'm sure they will prefer a product where I have a PDF report saying that this product, this medicine was not outside the cold chain, outside a particular temperature, against a product that didn't have this tracing of the temperature. In the case of the construction soil monitoring, it would be, well, as a constructor, I could be in good standing with the regulators. I can be proactive in sharing with them an application link to the web where they can check if I'm complying with the law or not, saving them the need to come to me and ask me questions every X amount of time. And in the case of the smart lakes, is, well, not only it's improving the measurement process, they're also opening up a new range of research by including more sensor, oxidation reduction potential, not only pH, temperature, wind direction, and that would ultimately help them find more dynamics or model more dynamics in how the lake pollution works. So let's see how that looks like for CHIP. So CHIP's example is a cool one because it would be, and I'm not an expert in CHIP's business, aside from what I'm telling you, but I would say that maybe arguing a sale to a national park to monitor park occupancy based solely on asset protection, it would be hard. No, it would be hard to justify the value. So then you start sitting down with your customer and you start asking questions. Okay, so how do you operate? And then things like this come up. You know, they have to manage the energy of the parks, the water in the parks, the parking, the attendance, of course. So the more devices you install to make this process easier, the more efficiently you can manage all your operations. And the government allocates funds to parks. And I'm sure, you know, that could be a reason why one park could get more funds against another, which is demonstrated that you are an efficient park as a park manager. Of course, from the product side, it will be the visitor experience. I would guess that eventually a visitor would say, well, I want to go to this park that offers where I can check if there's available parking or not, available place for camping, against another park that might not be as smart, if you will. And then what ended up being the most important or at the core of CHIP's value offer was, well, you know, parks receive funding based on visitation. So you better count those visitors because that's the source of your income. Okay, so with that, let's move to the second half. How are we doing on time, Christy? Okay, so let's make sure that we leave some time at the end for some questions. So about the market, there's like kind of this rule of thumb in the venture capital world where investors want to see that you can reach a global market that is as big as at least $1 billion. They want to see evidence that you can get 10% or get to $100 million in annual recurring revenue. And that's sort of, as I said, a rule of thumb in this startup / venture capital world. As an IoT entrepreneur, what we observe is it's more about local markets. It's more about solving local problems. Of course, it can scale eventually, but let's do the same approach from a bottoms-up approach. So let's say, be more conservative. Let's aim for a 5% of a local market. Let's say that me and my team want to aim for $500,000 recurring revenue in the first years of operations for it to be enough to maintain the team and make a living. So that would mean a $10 million market size. So the exciting part of this is IoT is enabling so many solutions to so many smaller problems and big ones as well, that there are way more $10 and $20 million market opportunities around a lot of different industries than there are billion-dollar ones. Everybody's looking for the unicorn status. So sometimes these smaller market size are overlooked. And that's where we argue a lot of opportunities exist and are yet to be discovered. About market size, well, for those of us who are in the industry, I'm sure we see a headline at least once per week saying that there will be 50 billion devices by 2020. Well, guess what? It's already 2020 and we're not even halfway there. So I would say don't worry too much about these top-down market approaches done by market analysts who don't have field expertise. Focus on an actual metric. So in the case of CHIP, if my main unit of revenue is device, and then I know how many devices a park can buy, then your market size will be in terms of parks. Same for Pablo, it will be amount of hospitals in Argentina, etc. So make use, that's why it's called a bottoms-up approach. It's using an actionable metric that you can then put into a business plan and start executing. So let's do an example for Chip. In his case, it turns out to be that magic metric turns out to be the counties, because the counties manage one or several parks around their area. So if you look at the US, it's over 3,000 counties, 100 of them are in North Carolina. If you had 5% of that market, then that will already create a stable business. As I said, he's already working with Wake County Parks, which is a great start and has been a great jump for his business. So let's move to the last part, subscription. So who doesn't like subscription revenue? It's I'm sure if you go to any tech event these days, or well, next year, you'll be hearing a lot about recurring revenue, especially these days, because as companies saw a large portion of their revenue suddenly disappear, well, the ones that had a subscription business model were able to reinvest that recurring revenue into the product and improve. And the good thing, and this happens to every business, right? Even in brick and mortar businesses, traditional businesses, they're trying to figure out how to create subscriptions. The good things for us, for all of us, is that IoT fits very well into this model because it has a lot of components that need to be taken care of. I'm gonna show here just a representation of what those components look like. So the typical IoT solution has hardware pieces. Into the hardware, you got sensors, you got actuators, you got the enclosure, you got the antennas. Then you have to deal with the connectivity. Are you going using cellular or LP1? Manage that network, store the data, analyze it, and then maintain the overall solution and provide support to your customers for something as simple as, hey, I want to create a widget to visualize this data on a table, or something more robust as, I want to extract this data and give it to my data scientist to play with it. So there's no way you can just install all of these things and forget about it. And that's the reason why I would say most of, if not all of IoT entrepreneurs use the subscription business model for their businesses. The prices you can expect per month, they vary a lot. We've seen industrial use cases receiving $200 per device per month. Of course, if that device is monitoring a production line, whose output is millions of dollars per hour or per day, then that device is very important, even if it's just one unit. So it really depends on the value that you generate. And then on the other side, you got these other agricultural projects that I talked to you about, where the value is more hidden, and you have to get creative with the customer to see how you can defer the payments of the hardware so that it's more like an OPEX cost, not a CAPEX cost. But yeah, at the end, it's all about a subscription price per month per device. So let's go back to Chip. And I'm making an assumption here, by the way. I'm saying it's not crazy to think that each county would be willing to pay 1 or 2K per month to make sure that they count enough visitors so that they receive enough funds for next year. So I think that's a good sell. Of course, there would be a lot of tuning involved. I'm not an expert in Chip's business, but that's how it would look like for him to break even. Let's say if you were aiming at 10K per month to pay some basic expenses and salary, then again, it's not a crazy number, to get 5% of a local market and create a stable revenue income. So this has been it about the common traits of successful IoT entrepreneurs. Again, this is by no means a suggestion that these are the only things that work, or if you do this, then you will immediately be successful. The entrepreneurial journey is full of serendipity, even luck. There's a lot of execution risks involved, but hopefully these four elements will provide as a means, at least to encourage you to follow this journey if you're thinking about it, and also share our ideas around them. So I think with that, Christy, thank you all for being here, and let's open it up for questions.
Hello.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Augustin. The first question that we have here, does Ubidots have tools to support billing for data or devices to end customers for a deployed application?
Okay, very good one. I love that feature. It's partially supported today. We have something called the user management. So our customers, they create more customers at the same time. So in this case, we need more parks, and then create more users within those parks. So at the end of the month, what they usually do is they pull a report, like an Excel report, where they see the utilization of each customer. So how many devices, how many SMS, how many emails were sent, etc. And then they build their invoices off from that. The next step, which is what you're suggesting, and it's a great idea, is to incorporate a custom logic to build those units so that that custom logic fits your business. So we were talking about $100 per device per month. So you should be able to create a plan where it's $100 per device per month, and then our system would automatically create the report that you can then use to invoice. The third, and that's in the roadmap, but it's not as close as this quarter, would be to connect your PayPal account and then start charging yourself.
Thank you, Augustin. And then the follow-up question, the second part of his question was, what about white labeling?
Okay, yeah, white labeling is at the root of what we do. One customer once said, "Oh wait, you guys are the Shopify of IoT," and I was like, I really like that because we are in the back office, right? We don't want to show our logo. We don't want your customers to know that you're using us. We want this to be your business, and then leave the back end and the rest of the back office to us. So yes, white labeling is supported upfront. Yeah.
Awesome. Those are all the questions I'm seeing now. If anyone has any more questions, I encourage you to use the Q&A box. Oh, here comes one right now. What makes Ubidots better than Node-RED?
Okay, that's great. Well, I use Node-RED, so I think it's a very cool tool. So Node-RED has been implemented more at the edge, for example, in a lot of Linux-based gateways, even in the industrial world, are shipping with Node-RED embedded. It's a very easy way to get a lot of different data sources locally and then post them to the cloud. That cloud could be us. So we're actually compatible with Node-RED. We have a native Node-RED library. So if you use Node-RED to wire things around your IoT project, you can add a node, an output node that is called Ubidots out. It uses MQTT in the back, and you will see your data in your Ubidots account. So it's more of a complement than a competing or an intersecting solution.
Wonderful, thank you. The next question here, what is the most unexpected or creative use of your platform that you've encountered?
Unexpected, a lot. I would say, for this example, I love to mention what happens. So we have a free product. It's called Ubidots STEM. And
that's actually the next question. So
okay, cool. So maybe I'm actually both. And the maker world is very exciting. It's very unpredictable. As I said, creative guys like Chip are just putting things together and coming up with their own solutions. So one of them was a German beer brewer. So as a hobby, he brewed, his own beer, and there's this concept called the hydrometer, which is, it follows like the bottle in the sea concept, where you put something and according to the tilt, it reports the density of the water. So he designed a hydrometer, 3D printed. I think the designs are open source.
We even have the tutorial.
Yeah, we have a tutorial now. So he created this as a means to solve his own problems again, right? He began, and then he put it in GitHub. A lot of people started asking, hey, can I 3D print this at my home? I said, yeah, of course. And the firmware that shipped with that device was connected to Ubidots. So without us planning for it, we began seeing a lot of German beer brewers, and even from other countries, and I'm talking thousands of units, using Ubidots to know whether they brew the perfect pint or not. So as a beer fan myself, that was a very fulfilling experience. Even though it's a free use case, it was a great thing to see.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Yeah, we have some big beer fans on the Riot team too. And then what is the Ubidots stem?
Okay, so following up on my previous answer, we have a forever free account option. It's called Ubidots STEM. It's got like over 60,000 users that use it to teach IoT researchers. A lot of researchers, we find a lot of surprising academic papers that are using Ubidots to prove some type of hypothesis around measurement, a lot of trainings, as I said, or just for personal projects. So it's free for 3 devices, and you can open up an account and start playing with it.
We have more than 60,000 users active. So it's a vibrant community for organic projects and just IoT stuff around. So we encourage everybody to use it as well.
Amazing resource for the community. Awesome. Kevin, yes, the presentation is being recorded and we will make sure to share that out. Thank you so much for that question. The next question here, this woman is really interested in the Ubidots platform, and she wants to know, what is the ease of use and implementation when you have a company with little technical expertise?
That's a good question, because I have a business background, and one of my tests when I got in the company was to send data with our devices. So I literally could do that in a week and have my plants measured. So I guarantee you that it's easy. We also take very seriously our partners. So we have a whole a wide range of device libraries, and we just try to make it as simple as possible. So I guarantee you, I mean, we're here to make it simple. So
you passed the test.
I mean, I'm here for 3 years now.
Yeah, I would say there's a new wave of devices that are coming out that are more
plug and play.
Plug and play, yeah. Like off the shelf. You can buy. I think Monit has some of those. I will be leaving a link for some office hours. So if you're interested, we can discuss this longer. And then look, depending on what you're trying to measure, see if there are off-the-shelf devices that can connect to an API, and then turn that API into Ubidots so that you can do the integration in a complete no-code experience.
Wonderful. The next question is, can you help find sensors that have been used on your platform?
Well, we have surveyed our own user base around which use cases. I can answer about the use cases. We cater a lot to the sensors that they use. Healthcare, manufacturing, agriculture, energy management, and smart cities. So that in terms of the sensors would be, healthcare is a lot about temperature and humidity. That those two are still king. Manufacturing is a lot about smart gateways that talk to sensors that are already installed anyway. So they plug into the industrial network and then just pull that data out. Agriculture, a lot of soil moisture, wind direction, weather stations. So everything that's packed in a weather station, we see a lot. And we actually have a blog article that we published like a month ago, like ranking those top sensors. So let's definitely include that in our follow-up email.
Wonderful. The next question, what hardware platform currently has the most Ubidots connections, and is it a custom PCB or off the shelf?
Custom
It's-
research.
No, it's off the shelf.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
I mean, we're trying to track that all the time, and it's, I would say, Particle is one of those, and also Expressive, the Node MCUs, and
yeah. The reason it's hard to
Depends.
track is because sometimes, let's say, Expressive, there's a custom PCB design
Yeah, exactly.
with an ESP32 inside. So, you know, do you call that a custom PCB or do you call that Expressive? So I would say as an
that's a good
aggregate, the custom PCB is where we see the most devices because that's what people choose when they start scaling. And then what's inside those devices, we see a lot of, Expressive, Particle, I would say, mainly, and then LP1 with the Things Network as well, and Sigfox. Yeah, that would be kind of the ranking.
Awesome, thank you. Next question, how is your product tying into eSIM technology and 5G network splicing models?
Okay, so in terms of the new cellular IoT, we're really agnostic in terms of the network. So we have, you know, if you have an eSIM or a local SIM, it's really transparent to us. So I guess, you know, from our side, it's not something that we are actively tackling from a product's perspective, but our customers do report having used at some capacity LTE-M, which sometimes includes an eSIM. 5G is still very nascent. I'm not aware of any 5G use case, especially because IoT is more about like small readings, whereas 5G is more about a lot of, you know, like high speed and a lot of bandwidth, which is not necessarily required for IoT. In fact, I think 5G, the spec, they dropped the IoT portion and they're keeping it in the LTE, because even the 4G specs, which are NB-IoT and LTE-M, they still have a long way to go before a new technology is designed around IoT. So yeah, that would be my answer.
Thank you, Augustin. Next question, how does the Ubidots platform fit into the smart manufacturing landscape?
Okay, this is a very cool one because we didn't plan for it necessarily. I like to say we come more from the cloud world, software development world, APIs. And then we began seeing a lot of use cases around manufacturing. So we're like, okay, let's pay attention to this. And the reason it was huge is because the manufacturing world already has SCADA systems. They already have like a lot of local screens where they have readings, and taking that data out was a challenge in a lot of cases. As the technology began to mature and you start seeing, even Siemens now has a gateway that talks PLC, so it's an industrial gateway on one side, and then it's an IoT gateway on the other side. As we began seeing more of those, then it was a great opening for us or for them to start using Ubidots as a lightweight, cloud-enabled SCADA system. So yeah, it's one of our main efforts right now. We're part of the Control System Integration Association in the US. We're very engaged with them and discovering new ways to use Ubidots in smart manufacturing.
Yeah, we have two partners. It's Red Lion and CTC Kepler, big players, so we're proud and honored to just be part of their network.
Thank you so much. Those are all the questions that I'm seeing. So I will just thank you so much, Augustin and Christina, for being here, and I will let you guys just reiterate how they can best contact you. And as always, feel free, all the participants, you can always contact me, Caroline Griffin with Riot, to get to any of our presenters. But thank you so much for being here today. Justin Castillo, we're so happy to have you.
And this was great.
Thank you,
We really
Caroline.
like Riot, and you can contact us in our emails, or I also, guys, send you the office hours link. Feel free to just schedule some time with us to dive deeper in anything.
Yep.
So yeah, thank you.
Thank you all for your time, and Caroline for setting this up. So look forward to learning more about what you're working on, and have a great rest of the week.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Same.